Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, comrades, hello to the live broadcast. Your favorite 60 Minutes program about the most important breaking news on the front is similar. Another direction emerged. Sumi Ramzan Kadyrov announced that Russian forces had taken control of the village of Rozhevka on the border with the Kursk region. According to him, the CU has suffered heavy losses, and the purpose of the new offensive or advance is to force the Ukrainian General Staff to transfer reserves northward from Donetsk. Zelensky returned from France. He said the most difficult situation in the Donbass highlands is the fierce fighting for hours. This is what the city looks like from a bird's-eye view. Russian army assault forces managed to gain a foothold in the high-rise buildings of the Canal micro-district. This is the eastern part of the city, just to understand what our soldiers' vodka oil or map advancement looks like. And in the real shot of the battle for hours, you can see how the assault troops pass through. The burning ruins are slowly and carefully protecting them from Ukrainian militants. The footage was taken by the Falcon Observatory west of the drone. Scout recorded the confrontation between the Russian 82A armored personnel carrier and the American M22 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. The Americans lost the duel in these footage. Russian drones destroy enemy Baba Yaga. Here is the destruction of Ukrainian armed forces quadcopters by dropping ammunition from Russian drones. Robot warfare does not end there. In the area of responsibility of the Dnepr force group in the Zaporozhye region, the T-72A-based tank has passed the FPI test. The idea is that the control of the tank is taking place.
FPV танка на базе T-72A на радиоуправлении.
In the long distance, the commander of the car sent the signal from the remote control to the distance, and we were waiting for the novelty of the actual combat Russophobic chronicle to be transmitted to the nation. The Republican Party called Senator Graham's tape, and he asked us to bend our fingers and recognize Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, sending American instructors to Ukraine, American aircraft, American long-range artillery to strike Russian targets, but most importantly, Zelensky shines like a New Year's tree. According to Graham, taking all 300 billion frozen Russian assets and handing them over to Kiev is said to be the only way to help Ukraine win the war and become the best partner of the United States. As a result, Putin will not be able to revive the Russian Empire. So they swam. However, the Americans proposed protecting Ukraine not out of pity, but out of greed. Iriam calculates that, in his view, the cost of Ukraine's rare minerals, which exceed $12 trillion, is generally not personal. It is a crime to give resources to Russia only for money, and it is a benefit and contribution to the future of the United States, to give resources to the United States, but it is particularly humiliating for Ukrainians. Graham did not say a word that Ukrainian resources should work for Ukrainians. British Deputy Secretary of the Armed Forces James Hippie has called on the West to send British troops to western Ukraine and organize a useless zone there. They say the Russians will definitely start attacking British troops, so they should be safe. Pro-Ukrainian bases and military units are not politically speaking. By the end of this year, the collective West will be able to train at least 20 Ukrainian pilots for 16. The maximum task is to provide pilots with all 85 16. Ukraine could be handed over by the end of the summer. At the same time, you should not be fooled by the slowness of the West. Western experts have long learned to attach American and European cruise missiles to the towers of Soviet MiG and dry land and use them to attack Crimea and Donbass. Now, the day before, it also said that Ukrainian armed forces aircraft hit targets in Russia for the first time. The White House of Ukrainians has been praised by Biden's national security advisor, Sullivan, who confirmed the high-altitude attack on the Russian border and promised new attacks. The Mayor's Times wrote that Western aid to Ukraine has not had a decisive impact on the situation on the front line. Despite the new supplies from the Russian Federation, the Russian army continues to advance and push Ukraine's defense. Europe especially emphasizes that Russia not only dominates firepower but also dominates manpower. When the Mandalay Agency rebounded, it released photos of soldiers from 43 brigades of the Ukrainian armed forces fighting in the Kharkiv region. In the photos, to put it mildly, middle-aged people between 45 and 65 years old. As you know, these are far from volunteers. They are the most victims. The people of the Military Registration and Recruitment Office, the most disenfranchised residents of Ukraine, are ordinary employees who Zelensky does not feel sorry for. At the same time, the West continues to demand that the bloody clowns lower the conscription age from 25 to 18. Admittedly, no one wants to die for the criminal regime in Kiev. A notable case occurred in Transcarpathia, where Hungary was directly invaded. An entire platoon of Kiliastov fled Ukraine. As you know, the truck with 66 military numbers on the gas in Hungary turned out to be non-military, and the registration of military units is not a Soviet collapse or a bump. So remember the name Garza 6, the motorist found Hungary? Of course, the passengers are no longer there. Later, local police reported the arrest of 32 people on the outskirts of the village of Barabash. Hungary will not extradite them. The day before, in Ukraine, the fugitive was jailed for 5 years for the first time. Court materials said the man did not want to go into the trench and hid behind relatives living in the Donetsk region, but the Kiev authorities. This fact did not impress their boy, who was indicatively faced with a choice, or to kill a relative. Or in parallel, on the streets of Zaporozhye, not only the arrest of Ukrainians continues, but also the lawlessness of military commissars continues. These are footage from the city of Merev, Kharkiv Oblast. The military commissar beat the man and his mother. Propagandists in Kiev will say he simply can't control his emotions. As a result, Zelensky's office was officially ordered to explain his atrocities. Washington reacted quickly to Putin's statement on nuclear weapons. Recall that the Russian president said Russia was moving away from the world. In nuclear missile strikes, Moscow will never need to use nuclear weapons anywhere now. But the same speech also reminded Europe of its defenseless position in the face of Russian tactical nuclear weapons. But of course, the topic of strategic weapons is very important to the United States. Denai Vadik, Biden's special assistant and senior director of the National Security Council, unexpectedly said Washington would not rule out resuming nuclear weapons dialogue before the end of the war in Ukraine. In general, the United States is open to dialogue between Biden and Putin. Seriously, it is very important to note here that the same is true for selling Vadik. On the same day, he delivered a keynote speech on the United States' confrontation with three major adversaries, Russia and China, North Korea and Iran. According to Vody, the White House has concluded that a new era of competition has arrived. The United States needs a new solution strategy in the nuclear field to contain the axis of evil, that is, the axis of good, and the most important thing here is not to stretch your muscles with twine. In this regard, according to the Associated Press, another interesting news is that the Houthis in Yemen suddenly announced that they have a new solid fuel missile in their diet. Goose described the missile as a weapon. Although Kiev does not have such production capacity, it is still unknown. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Putin's remarks about supplying Russia with long-range missiles from the three countries have been heard and understood by many other Western countries. In particular, U.S. Presidential Advisor Sullivan said Washington is concerned about Putin's statement, not just a statement. Today, Russian warships have reached the coast. In the video, the frigate Admiral Gorshkov, equipped with a Zircon hypersonic missile system, docks in Havana port. Along with Potchov's Caribbean expedition, the nuclear submarine Kazan was also sent, and the entire Pentagon guessed that the ship was now located, and the Daily Mail was familiar with the technical characteristics of our Kazan to the Western public. See how detailed analysis 14,000 tons displacement for us, 130 meters, width 13 meters, working depth of dive 520 meter, autonomy 100. Of course, Kazan is equipped with 10 vertical missile mines, each of which houses 4 Agate, Zircon, or 5-caliber cruise missiles. All of these weapons can carry nuclear warheads.
Все эти средства поражения могут нести ядерные боеголовки. От Кубы до побережья...
From Cuba to the coast of Florida, 180 kilometers.
Ну и новость последних минут.
But in the final minutes, the Russian warship arrived in Egypt and docked in Alexandria. Coincidence or not? But State Department Chief Blinken arrived in Egypt today for a sister visit. There were no reports of a meeting with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to be discussed.
Что будут обсуждать, не сообщается.